Let us pray. O Lord, our God, we give you thanks for giving us another day, especially as we approach this wonderful season. We ask your blessing upon our nation. Bless the work of the members of this house. May they work diligently to bring about solutions to the pressing issues of these times. Bless all men and women across our country, especially those who work in the service of others. Especially today, we remember our police service, medical personnel, and members of our civil service. May all that is done this day be for your greater honor and glory through Jesus Christ, our Lord. Amen. Say the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those that trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
This House is in session. Minutes of the meeting held on Tuesday, December 5th, 2023 to be deferred. Honourable Leader, Government Business. To be deferred.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move that the aforesaid minutes be deferred.
The questions that the aforementioned minutes be deferred. All of our members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Meeting, the ayes have it. The aforementioned minutes are hereby deferred.
Announcements by Your Honor, the Speaker. Messages from Her Excellency, the President. Petitions, papers, government notices, private members' notices, notices of questions, reports from select committees, first readings of bills, statements by ministers, congratulatory and/or obituary speeches, personal explanations, motions for leave of absence, oral replies to questions, notices of motion for the adjournment of the House on matters of urgent public importance, orders of the day.
The government business.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the suspension of standing orders 6, 16, 18, 20, 42, subsection 5, 43, and 44 for the remainder of the day's sitting.
The question is that the aforementioned standing orders be suspended for the remainder of the day sitting. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Meeting, the ayes have it. The aforementioned standing orders are hereby suspended for the remainder of the day sitting.
Government business, sir. In the name of the Honourable Senior Minister in the Prime Minister's Office, to resume the debate on the passing of a resolution to approve the Barbados Physical Development Plan as amended 2023.
Honourable Member for St. Joseph. Mike.
I suppose I've had the good fortune, Mr. Speaker, of participating in a number of debates on the National Development Plan over the years. I am especially pleased to be able to be again so involved in relation to our new National Development Plan, which will begin from the year 2023, and it will have a life of, is it 3 years? Have a life of 3 years. 10 years. Mr. Speaker, I suppose one of the things about being a member of Parliament, especially if you've been a member of Parliament for a little while, is that you will look at your constituency and see how things have changed over the years. And therefore it gives you a unique perspective because on the one hand, you are the representative of the people who you have committed to serve. But on the other hand, you are a part of a larger mandate, a mandate of seeing how Barbados can develop in such a way as to satisfy the interests of the people you serve, your constituents, while not taking away from the interests of the larger society. If I carry you back to jurisprudence, sir, you would recall the concept of law, which basically says that law is a construct that seeks to satisfy the greatest interests with a minimum of friction and waste. And it's the last part of that sentence that I want to home in on, sir. That is, that we must so manage the affairs of our country to achieve the greatest good with a minimum of friction and a minimum of waste. Friction, Mr. Speaker, would relate to the inevitable contest that takes place between citizens in a society. So I have constituents who say, Mr. Marshall, we need a gas station in St. Joseph. That is their interest. That is what they want. But is it so easy, sir, to satisfy our constituents' needs in a vacuum? Or do we have to measure our needs and wants against the greater interests? And so the contest between those interests is what we describe as friction. Waste, on the other hand, has to do essentially with what is left. Then once you have satisfied the interests of the various interest groups, have you been able to minimize the loss in your society, whether it is loss of opportunity to do development, loss of jobs, loss of a whole set of things? Mr. Speaker, I begin with this point because the constituency of St. Joseph is a unique constituency. And with due respect and deference to all of the St. Michael MPs, the kinds of things that we have to deal with in rural Barbados are vastly, vastly different. It is not that there are two Barbadoses. I don't subscribe to that. But it is, Mr. Speaker, that the kinds of considerations that myself, the member for St. Andrew, the member for St. Thomas, have to bear in mind as we deal with our constituents are very different to the kinds of considerations that you, Mr. Speaker, might have to consider when dealing with your constituents. The constituency of St. Joseph is smack dab in the middle of the Scotland District. Scotland District, as we know, occupies 1/5 of Barbados' land space. It is perhaps the most fragile part of our environment. The things that sometimes make it more attractive are also the things that represent the greatest risk. So as you rise up the escarpments, sir, going into rural Barbados, and you get near the top of Horse Hill and recognize, sir, that the air is sweet and there's a cool breeze in the air, you have to take into account, sir, the fact that the rain falls virtually every day in some parts of Barbados, St. Thomas and St. Joseph. And now, while I know that we will see that as a blessing, it also creates a significant challenge for us in terms of our ability to maintain our infrastructure, our ability to maintain roads, our ability to arrest slippage. So when we talk about the uniqueness of rural Barbados, sir, yes, it is unique. And we have to make sure as we engage in the process of planning for Barbados that we take into account the uniqueness and try to satisfy the important needs, sir, of the individuals in those parts of Barbados. Now, Mr. Speaker, I believe that all of my constituency will probably fall within the national park. And if there's any part of it that doesn't fall within the national park, it would actually be relatively small. Now, this development plan says, and permit me to quote the passage for you, sir. It says, no new development will be permitted in national park settlements which, in the opinion of the officer in charge of the Soil Conservation Unit and/or the National Heritage Department, are located on sites susceptible to erosion or landslip. So this development plan essentially says that no new development will be permitted in areas of the Scotland district, of the National Development Park, areas of St. Joseph that are susceptible to slippage. Now, Mr. Speaker, there are some realities that we have to face. And that's why it's important, sir, to manage the respective interests with that minimum of friction and waste. You see, sir, if we do not permit development in St. Joseph, or so restrict development that it becomes unappealing, we are going to be perpetuating that drift of the population from rural Barbados, from parts of my constituency, parts of St. Andrew and parts of St. Thomas, and increase the pressure on the parts of urban Barbados, sir, or peri-urban Barbados, because if we're not going to allow residential development, for argument's sake, in certain parts of Horsell or other areas, then we have an obligation to provide housing for them. So we have to provide housing for them in parts outside of rural Barbados. Now, sir, while that may seem like an easy thing for a planner to settle on, while it may seem like an easy thing for the executive to settle on, it isn't just that the place is unique, it's also that the people are unique, sir. Because when I talk to my constituents and say, well, you know, we don't have any house spots in St. Joseph now, but you can find a house spot in Kingsland. Not that there's a house spot in Kingsland, remember, for St. George. I'm not suggesting that, but the point is if we can't house them at home, we got to send them somewhere else. And they say to you, I do not want to live outside of St. Joseph. When we talk about the navel string being buried, that is exactly what we're talking about. There's a whole lifestyle that is associated with rural Barbados that you cannot find in St. Michael. Interestingly enough, though, sir, there are parts of Barbados, I think if you go in Jackmans, in St. Michael, you would find that virtually half of the population in Jackmans come from St. Joseph. I know many of them. But that was a move to urban areas that took place in the 50s and the 60s. Then you couldn't get a bus. You couldn't get to work. You had to get near to your workplace. You couldn't get schools. So in those days, the people moved because they had to. But today, Mr. Speaker, where we have the prevalence of motor cars and so on, that dynamic does not apply in the same way. And so my constituents say to me, but I want to live in St. Joseph. I cannot continue to live in my mother or my grandmother's house. I need an opportunity to build my own. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, it is why I've begun to talk about this particular issue. Now, they say the devil doesn't know the most because he's the brightest. It's really because he's been around longer than most people. I'm not saying that I'm the devil, but I've had the benefit of dealing with the constituency of St. Joseph now for 21 years. Now, Mr. Speaker, there are some realities that worry me. You see, sir, St. Joseph is made up of a number of small settlements. And those small settlements, sir, will have one or two churches. They have one or two shops. In years past, they would have had a school. Little things that sustain village life. If, Mr. Speaker, we do not allow development in these sensitive areas, and people have to move out, Mr. Speaker, it creates a problem. You see, sir, and we see it in Bridgetown, but I'll come to that in a moment. When people move out, the church, and I think the chaplain would agree with me, the ready parishioners for that church ain't coming back. And the congregation diminishes and the church begins to show signs of dying. When people move out, sir, the village shop also begins to die. No, it is in large measure had challenges because of the very cars and things. People now go to the supermarket. But, sir, the things that connect the village, that connect the people in the village, become weaker. And so, Mr. Speaker, when people say to me, man, AG, we think that the best thing to do is to move out people from Spar Hill, move the people out from Parks Road, move out people. Mr. Speaker, it is something that I rail against with my every breath. It's not about maintaining the voting population. It is about maintaining our societies. If we do not make sure that residents in those areas, yes, I accept that there are challenges, but if we don't make sure that people continue to live in our rural areas, in our Scotland District areas, Mr. Speaker, those communities will die. If you look at Bridgetown, there are people who say that Bridgetown has died. I remember the twice removed member for the city, and I know I should give you notice that I will call her name, but I crave your indulgence. Dame Billy Miller. Dame Billy Miller gave a speech in Istanbul. I had the privilege of being there because at the time I was chairman of the National Housing Corporation. This would have been like the early 1990s, probably 95 or 96. And in her speech, Dame Billy Miller reflected on what was her city, the city of Bridgetown. And she spoke about the fact that when she had first come to politics, there were people living all in Subtle Street, and in every corner, there are people living now where Ponside is. There were bustling communities of residents in the city. But those people have gradually moved out and moved out and moved out and have made way for businesses. Some areas have fallen into a state of dereliction. But Billy Miller's central theme was, where you don't have residents in a city, that city dies. It is no different, sir, to rural areas. If we do not facilitate the continuation of residential activity in those parts of the Scotland District, then those areas will die, sir. And I am against that. No, it doesn't, that's why we talk about satisfying the greater good with the minimal friction and waste. You see, sir, in my early years as an MP, I had the benefit of meeting with the individuals in soil to try to get a handle for what we were dealing with. And I've repeated that meeting many times, and with many different ministers of agriculture. And just to remind the chamber, ministers of agriculture have responsibility for the Scotland District. Don't know why, but they do. Maybe it's from the days when we used to farm things in the Scotland District. So, we had some meetings with the engineers and the Scotland District staff and so on, and with some residents. And Mr. Speaker, 50 years ago, you had houses on all of those hillsides. But they were not, as the people say, big able wall houses. They were wooden houses, they were shuttle houses. And they had no running water in the house. They had a house as a toilet. And therefore, those kinds of residences did not result in land slippage because they didn't create a circumstance where there was a lot of water runoff and you had 2 bathrooms and a washing machine and 3 sinks and all that kind of thing, all pushing water into the soil, which would then slip. And while none of us want to go back to those days, the engineers have said to me, sir, that the solution may well be that we don't need to say no more development. What we need to do is to say, we will permit you to do your development, but it has to be of a particular kind. And they begin by saying a concrete block house with enough bedrooms, enough bathrooms, in a situation where the soil gets soaked, the weight will be too great. So, sir, it is a wonderful thing that the shuttle house has had such a great rebirth in the Barbadian vernacular when it comes to housing. Lord knows, Mr. Speaker, if I ever have to build another house in my life, it will be a shuttle house, swear to God. I will, if I could advise most people now, I will say to them, these big wall houses that we love to build, take it for somebody who's been there and done that. Build a shuttle house, it's cooler, it's more comfortable, it's easier to repair, it's cheaper to maintain. and less that, not know that, less that. So where am I taking this discussion, Mr. Speaker? I want to have a discussion about how we can maintain residential activity in those areas that are susceptible. I would never suggest, sir, that we go and put them in the worst of the worst. Never. But I believe, Mr. Speaker, that there are opportunities for us to look to see where we could possibly accommodate housing of a different kind. And so let us look at building a lighter structure. And I believe that today's technology will allow us to do that. But let us also mandate how people are supposed to deal with their water runoff. And the engineers at Soil told me, the problem is you got bigger houses, so you got bigger roofs. And the fact they have bigger roofs means that the roof catches more water, and you got more water running off into the soil. And they've said to me to stop people from letting the water run straight off next to the house. Make sure that they put up guttering. And then they say that the guttering needs to carry all the way into the bottom of the gully. Because if you drop it off short, you're still creating the same problem. Now, I understand that is a cost thing. Who wants to buy 20 lengths of, PVC pipe to go down into the bottom? But the point is that we know enough about the Scotland District, Mr. Speaker, that I believe that rather than saying to my constituents or some constituents from the member of St. Andrew or St. Thomas, no, we will not allow you to build, we should say to them, we will allow you to build so long as you follow a new model of building. If you don't want to build a shuttle house, a wooden house, a nice board bungalow, fine, well then maybe Kingston is the place for you. But if you want to stay in the Scotland District, keep our communities alive, then we have a way of accommodating what you want. Lighter construction, better handling of the water runoff, and those things. And I believe, sir, that will enable us to say to my constituents in those threatened areas, you do not have to look for housing elsewhere. Mr. Speaker, a public servant once told me that we should move out the people in the Spar Hill because it costs too much to fix the road. No. You know, I can think of one family in the Spar whose great-great-grandfather sent back money from Panama to buy the 4-acre lot that they still live on. But somehow it seems easier, rather than to deal with the environmental challenges and fix the road, it seems easier to say, man, move them out. Move them out. Let the place run to ruin. Let the place run wild. Mr. Speaker, that too I rail against. There's no doubt that the road infrastructure in my constituency suffers largely because of the nature of the soils, the Scotland District clays, I believe they call them. But we can find solutions to deal with these things, sir. We must not always have as our default position, no, can't happen, it's easier to move you. There will be times when moving the people is the solution. The government has now, on 2 occasions, maybe even 3, moved the people from White Hill. And history shows that it has been impossible to sustain the level of infrastructure in White Hill as would allow people to continue to reside there. So there will be times, and I concede that right up front to the member for Christchurch South who has piloted this resolution. Yes. Who has piloted this resolution. There will be places where we have to say no more. I accept that. But I'm asking, Mr. Speaker, that we do not have no as our default position. I don't believe that the default position of a government should be no. Our default position should be, let us see how best we can get you where you want to be while not taking away the benefit from the greater number of people and while minimizing friction and waste. Mr. Speaker, I have in St. Joseph a tremendous challenge with roads. It is tremendous. In fact, I once thought that I would come to blows with the member for St. Andrew, who I thought that he and I would march arm in arm and fix all the roads between St. Andrew and St. Joseph. I believe that we continue our cordial relationship, but if something don't happen soon, a few blows may well have to be launched in his general direction. But the fact is, sir, that when you look at what happens along many of our roads, sir, the constant rain, but also the fact that a lot of if you take our bridges, they weren't constructed for modern vehicles. In fact, you know, these are the kinds of balancing acts that the government has to deal with, because on the one hand, I'm told that the electric bus, everybody knows electric buses are good for the economy, but apparently they are much heavier than a bus with a diesel engine. So we gain on one side in terms of protecting the environment, so in terms of the blue-green economy, we score great points. But in terms of the challenge on the road infrastructure, and I don't mean to suggest, Mr. Speaker, that our roads have begun to be damaged as a result of that, as a result of the electric buses, but I simply did not know that the electric buses were heavier. But the point is that when you look at a lot of our road infrastructure in the Scotland District, it was built years and years and years ago. And an old Bedford cane truck probably weighs a lot less than a big tour bus. Now, it is not easy for us to keep our infrastructure in pristine condition. It isn't. And in the Scotland District, it must be one of the worst areas. But in order for this national development plan to mean something for Barbados, sir, everybody has to be brought along. We can't take a position which says, you know, we can leave you the way you are and concentrate our investment and our development on other parts of Barbados. So I am calling, Mr. Speaker, for all of the government departments not to see this National Development Plan as enshrining a no into our response as a government, but pointing out, sir, that we have to empower our people by trying to find a way to satisfy their dreams. Mr. Speaker, the National Development Plan also speaks about the importance of open spaces. And you know, I've been a firm advocate, while I want to see the constituency of development of St. Joseph developed fully and the constituency of St. Andrew developed, and St. Thomas too. We also have to recognize that part of the intrinsic beauty of the Scotland District has to do with us limiting the nature and scope of development. So there are going to be opportunities for us to develop some areas, and we should cherish those, we should seize them. But we should also try to maintain as many open spaces as possible. And in this regard, sir, we have to have private sector involvement and public sector involvement. I am able, Mr. Speaker, to boast of a park in a place called Beachmont in St. Joseph, which was contributed to the people of St. Joseph, and in fact the people of Barbados, by a private individual. It isn't a huge park, but it is easily one of the parks with the loveliest views that you could ever want to find. A gracious individual felt, this is what I want to give to this community, and we were very happy to receive it. But further up the hill, the National Conservation Commission has also done a Clean and Green project to give us a wonderful open space in the area of Blackmans. An area, sir, it was a space that was left in the housing development to be used as an open space, but nothing was ever done on it. So it was just left as bush. And I'm very grateful to the minister for that particular intervention. But the point is that we have to accept that in order to make the blue-green economy a reality, we have to keep green open spaces in Barbados available. And that will mean that as a government we have to make some decisions. There's some things we will have to say no to after careful consideration. But I believe, sir, that the reason people like to drive through St. Joseph on a weekend is precisely because of those open, untouched vistas, the lush greenery, and so on. And I hope that we can maintain that for a long, long time. Mr. Speaker, I don't propose to go too much longer, but I do want to say that as we plan out a Barbados for the next 10 years, we should treat this document as a living document. It is a national development plan, but it isn't necessarily the plan for our development. The plan for our development has to take into account so many more things than our physical space. This plan just deals with our physical space. That's why it's a physical development plan. And we can develop our physical development all we want. But unless we pay some attention, Mr. Speaker, to the other side of things, sir, this physical development plan will be like a thing written in water. I look forward, Mr. Speaker, to all of the various initiatives in this particular document coming to fruition. But one of our famous court cases looked at the status of the National Development Plan, and that judge found, sir, that while the plan was important, that it was not to be seen as having the validity of a statute. In other words, the physical development plan is more aspirational And while it is conceived of in the Planning and Development Act, while it is a feature of our law, it is not the law. In that particular case, an individual wanted to argue that something that was in the physical development plan was to be treated as a statement of what must happen. And the judge very, very sensibly found that that was not to be the case. There's a reason for the plan, but the plan was not to be treated as the law. And it therefore means that there's going to be sufficient flexibility to satisfy the many interest groups who need to be satisfied as we set about ensuring that the physical landscape of Barbados is built out to the best advantage of all the people. Mr. Speaker, I support this plan. It is a long document. I've read some parts of it enthusiastically, others with a little less, but only because my eyes felt a little tired. But I'm happy, Mr. Speaker, to throw my absolute support behind this plan. But as I said, I only ask that as we deal with the planning issues in the Scotland District, we do not adopt a default position of no. A default position of no will help no one, and it will see the death of our currently vibrant societies. And I'm trying to keep those societies vibrant, sir. We have now been able to welcome in the Bathsheba area an additional restaurant. It burnt down only 2 weeks ago, but the owner has expressed his keen interest in getting it up and going. We have a number of other food and recreational facilities. I look forward to the day in the very near future, Mr. Speaker, where Bathsheba will be able to retain much of its characteristic as a sleepy oceanside village, but I want it to have some more restaurants. I want it to be a place where Barbadians can come to on a weekend, book a little guest house, stay there, and have some of the finest food available. And we're reaching that point. We're reaching that point, and I hope, sir, to be around to be able to enjoy the fruits of some of this early labor as we lay the foundation for a better Barbados. With those words, I'm obliged to you.
Honourable Member for St. George South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let me rise to give my support to this resolution that amends the Physical Development Plan 2023. Mr. Speaker, I rise after a very, what I call, simple but detailed and comprehensive discourse speech by the member for St. Joseph, and he knows the respect that I have for him. And Mr. Speaker, while I will support most of what he said with respect to the Scotland District, which is 1/5 the landmass of this country, and I recall a similar discussion, member for St. Joseph, under a former leader of this administration that spoke about the neglect, but he spoke on it, the neglect by the former administration on the Scotland District. And most of what were echoed in this chamber, that former leader, Lord rest him in his grave, warned us against the impact of destabilizing the Scotland District, not physically, but if you want to say metaphorically, with respect to persons exiting the rural Barbados and moving into the urban corridor. But I throw support behind this document, and I want to congratulate the member for Christchurch West, as well as the member who started this document, the work on this document, member for St. Michael South Central, along with the theme echoed by the member for Christchurch West, the technocrats, the consultants, and they have done a wonderful job. This physical development plan outlines a vision for Barbados over the next 10 years. Outline the vision over the next 10 years as a nation that is resilient and prepared for the impact of climate change. As a nation that fosters the blue and green economy and focuses its strategies on economic growth and wealth creation for many Barbadians, by honing in on various sectors of transport, agriculture. My member for St. Philip South, I'm certain he will speak on agriculture shortly. Agriculture, fisheries, tourism, renewable energy, the various sectors. But for me, Mr. Speaker, the development of Barbados and the vision for Barbados over the next 10 years to create a nation that is safe and to create a nation that focuses on our people and our people's development. And I heard the member for St. Peter who spoke eloquently last week in this Lord Chamber with respect to the whole aspect of peopling as it relates to the physical development plan. And, Mr. Speaker, we cannot underscore what this plan sets out, the detailed plan, whether it is focusing on our environmental ecosystem, biodiversity, cultural heritage, the national heritage, renewable energy, at the center of Barbados' development, sustainable development, and building a resilient society is our people. And I congratulate you again, member, on the comprehensive nature of this document. I read it in its entirety, just like you, the member for St. Joseph. And I'm going to pick a piece out. I'm not going to be as parochial as the member for St. Joseph, and he had a right to be. But I recognize the St. George Valley in this document, and I want to thank you for recognizing the fertility of the St. George Valley as it relates to agriculture, the most fertile part of our country. And while I can see the focus on agriculture, while I can see the focus on the scarcity of land, water, and food, I know within this document you haven't only mentioned the St. George Valley that I have the full responsibility for. I know you may have responsibility for it in this physical development plan. But those good people of St. George South, they elected me, and therefore I have the ultimate responsibility to ensure that the St. George Valley remains the most fertile valley in this country. And while I will go into the housing grand concourse shortly, I am urging, I have responsibility for housing. And I know this government will not destabilize the St. George Valley like the former administration sought to do in the 10 years that they held the realm of leadership of this country. And I stood where the member for St. Michael West, just 2 chairs away from you, sir, where the member for St. Lucie sat. And I recall echoing to the former Minister of Agriculture not to destabilize the St. George Valley. And I am happy to see that this physical development plan has indeed captured the significance of the St. George Valley. I'll move away from being parochial because I have a greater mandate on behalf of the people of this country. And this moves me into what I call the housing concourse. Within this physical development plan, we recognize, and it is written here, the scarcity of land, scarcity of water, and the scarcity of food. And within those 3 scarcities, we have carved out the policies, the guidelines, and the principle by which we will develop every aspect of this country to ensure that we utilize our scarce water, the best use for our water, the best use for our land, and of course, food security. But Mr. Speaker, my mandate relates to housing. And within the physical development plan, the housing needs of this country over the next 10 years will have a different look. We speak to a different complexion. And that is because of several reasons. And one I will start with is the aging population. You recognize people are living longer. And I thank you, member for Christchurch, especially at page 16. Persons are living longer. And indeed, while this is not to be underscored, we have persons who, after their toil in the international world, earning a living, some who are our citizens and some who are not our citizens, they do what we call retire and come to this lovely place to live. And over the next 10 years, the needs of housing with new households, rather than focusing on population growth or lack thereof, we have to look for the diversity or the diverse needs of our population, and the aging population, that's one. And I'm happy to see, again, I'm sorry that I have to mention my lovely village as the constituency of St. George South. But the Sagicor village, if you want to call it a retirement village, is one that we have to replicate, we have to reproduce, we have to copy, because persons are living longer. And I'm going there because the amenities and the various services that are being offered in that village, we never saw anything like this 50 years ago. As the member for St. Joseph mentioned, persons were satisfied with a half-acre lot, 8,000 square feet, 5,000 square feet, place a dwelling house on, and they were comfortable. Having said that, there are certain traits that occurred back then that we have to carry on, like persons doing backyard farming, persons growing, keeping this country green with a thrust of improving the environment. But gone are the days when persons will be living on 1 acre lots, and the traditional family structure exists. The new households, the young professionals, the average person, they're seeking to own their own home. And as the member again for St. Joseph mentioned, we have to offer them diverse housing options. So rather than the traditional bricks and mortar, we are now looking at light gauge steel structures. We are now focusing on hardwood structures rather than the normal plywood. But these are the different types of options that we are bringing forward to our households. The young singles and couples wishing to live on their own, they do not need multi-bedroom houses or accommodation, houses with 4 or 5 bedrooms. They're looking for 1 and 2 bedrooms with amenities, and they're also looking at a way to reduce the transportation costs. So gone are the days when you can drive from St. Andrew to the city to buy 2 shirts, a blouse, to get a pair of glasses, to get earrings. But we are indeed building accommodation and settlements formal settlements, we should call it, and not housing, but formal settlements with amenities that we can reduce the use of transport. And we can give those persons, those aged persons, the aged population, the opportunity to indeed shop where they live. Go to your pharmacy, get your medication. Gone are the days where you have to get on the bus and travel 6 miles to get your medication. That is the type of housing that we're focusing on. And that is the type of policies that are explained in this document, so well put together, the physical development plan. But Mr. Speaker, there's also a need to focus our housing stock in areas where we have sites and services, roads, water, electricity, good drainage. These are some of the areas that have been explained in this document. But why are we focusing there? This government's mandate is to build affordable and resilient housing. When we examine the cost of housing in this country, the cost of infrastructure carries the bulk of the cost. So if we are truly to build affordable housing and resilient housing, our focus has to be on creating these formal settlements where there's good infrastructure. And we have started that. This document speaks to that. Mr. Speaker, this document also speaks to the different categories of housing in terms of types of housing and in terms of class of housing. When this government came to office, we sought to classify housing in 3 areas. Persons earning less than $2,500 a month. Persons earning between $25,000 and $5,000 a month net. And then persons earning above $5,000 net. And we recognize that the focus has to be on the persons earning, Mr. Speaker, under $2,500, and also on the persons earning between $2,500 and $5,000 a month net. Not because we are not interested in those persons who are earning more than $5,000 monthly net, but because we believe those persons can afford to shop around for housing in every sector of this country, in every segment of this country. Those persons, believe it or not, and I know you believe it, those are the persons that can go to the lending institution and say, I have an asset, and I can leverage this asset to get a home. But the ones who are earning less than $5,000 and the ones who are earning less than $2,500, those are the vulnerable groups, especially the ones earning less than $2,500. So this government, and it is articulated in this plan, we have a duty to our people. And that is why our housing options have been so policy-driven with respect to the categories that I have just listed, to push affordable and resilient home ownership for every single class in this country. This document that in reference refers to everything that I just spoke to with respect to the various class of housing and how we are going to build up the housing stock to cater to the different classes. Mr. Speaker, we also recognize as a government we are not to leave anyone behind. And Mr. Speaker, persons living with disability, the need to have housing for persons living with disability is so well articulated in this document. And I congratulate again the member for Christchurch West and our government led by the member for St. Michael Northeast, who saw the need to create a policy within government that is fully explained in this document, that 10% of all houses that we are building as a government must be allocated for persons living with disability. And it is within this document. I know the member for St. James North, he was present when we opened the most recent 20 units at Arlene's Court. And 2 persons living with disabilities were present, and they're now residents of Arlene's Court. This is well articulated in this document. We spoke to development plan to incorporate a greater variety of housing types, tenures, forms, and sizes to reflect the needs of the changing demographic, and smaller housing sizes. So, Mr. Speaker, encouraging the development of multifamily housing, townhouses and apartments, condominium buildings. And I wish to mention here, Mr. Speaker, the fact that this document recognizes the scarcity of land suggests that we can no longer build with such low densities per acre of land mass. So to increase those densities, on average, we build 10 units per acre. We have now reached a stage as a result of the scarcity of land. We have to build with higher densities. And our target, our KPI, is on average 14 to 15 units per acre. But how do you do that? You do that through what we call high-rise, condominiums, apartments. But one of the key aspects to achieve this, and I heard the member for St. Joseph again, he spoke to the physical aspect, and he said it's not only the physical, and I agree with you, because to achieve residence in high-rise and through the condominium act, member for St. Joseph, we have to do some legislative amendments to that act to allow persons to own their own home through the use of the Condominium Act. And that is work in progress. This document speaks to that. Mr. Speaker, we have to ensure that the basic infrastructure services, including the provision of wastewater, and I heard the member for St. Joseph mention that wastewater management, sanitation, health, and emergency services are part of our housing plan. And reason being, the member for St. Thomas knows very well the HNUP program that we had years ago, how we feel as a form of government, and not this government, the Housing Neighborhood Upgrade Program. HNUP, that's the acronym. And Mr. Speaker, presently, is all articulated here. We are focusing our efforts on improving the urban corridor. And I recall recently in a statement saying that we cannot have our cities looking like Disney World. Meaning that we can't only have the beautiful stores, we can't only have the beautiful commercial activity going on at the hotels. Because if we don't put housing in our cities, we'll be creating some Disney World. And Mr. Speaker, that's why the Treasury building, the use of the Treasury building for residential and commercial purposes has indeed been part of our plan to revitalize urban regeneration or revitalize our city. This too has been articulated in our physical development plan, the urban renewal project. The use of green spaces, again, the member for St. Joseph mentioned that, and the role that green spaces will play. Only last week I went to Handsome Crescent with the good member for Christchurch East, West Central, and we opened the park. Developments, and I call on the developers then to recognize the importance of creating green spaces as you build out developments across the landscape of this country, whether in the urban or in the rural corridors. I must say, though, they have been doing that. But I must say, within some areas, we have allowed those green spaces to turn into bush. And while we recognize the importance of the wildlife and the fauna and the flora, we still have to do it in an organized way so as not to create health issues within these communities. So the importance of maintaining green spaces is not only critical to our greening our economy, but critical to our health and to combat issues of dengue, leptospirosis, various sicknesses that we can get from rodent infestation within our community. So this too is articulated in our plan. The importance of maintaining a healthy population and treating with non-communicable diseases is articulated in this plan. Mr. Speaker, the physical development plan, sir, also supports the provision of affordable housing by the National Housing Corporation and through joint venture partnerships. And it speaks to locating within lands that are serviced by potable water and roads. It speaks to locating these formal settlements and houses in proximity to services and amenities. And it speaks to providing access to transportation choices, including public transport. This policy also, Mr. Speaker, went into the whole aspect of addressing what we call informal settlements, squatting. And Mr. Speaker, this whole aspect of treating with the informal settlements would allow us to treat with risk, better use of land, because we know the health and environmental implications of persons living in informal settlements. May present sanitation challenges, may present health challenges, the lack of waterborne toilets, living in zones that are not classified as areas for affordable and resilient housing. These are some of the reasons why the informal settlements have to be addressed. And Mr. Speaker, while I recognize what we have done in the physical development plan, I can also say that prior to this document, we have started the process of regularizing tenantries where there's housing and where persons are living in what we call informal settlements. The Rock Hall relocation project the work hall tenantry settlement, the settlement that Cabinet just approved for persons living in Hoyts Village. These are some of the settlements for persons living at River Bear, Bath and St. John. And indeed, we do this with a view to encourage home ownership. And within the physical development plan, we also will formalize tenantries on plantation and non-plantation land, where we are encouraging the sale of land on non-plantation tenantries in urban areas to qualify tenants at a subsidy at a rate, member for St. Joseph, at $2.50 per square foot for the first 5,000 square feet. And this indeed, if we truly analyze what we're doing as a country, as a government, we're utilizing housing to enfranchise and empower every single citizen or family in this country. We currently have, at National Housing Corporation, 18,000 applicants. And while we have announced the housing grand concourse or housing concourse, whereby we are seeking to build 10,000 houses over a 5-year period, you can do the math and you can see that 18,000 applicants and 10,000 housing solutions over a 5-year period will still give us a deficit with respect to those persons who desire or who wish and their ambition is to own a home in this country. But Mr. Speaker, I also wish to say that most of our land that have been allocated for housing is within that rural corridor that the member for St. George's spoke about. In parishes like St. Lucie, St. Peter, St. George, St. Philip. So while we would not want to see a mass exodus of residents from the rural area, the housing program that we have embarked upon will certainly ensure that, because the land mass and the land allocated to housing in this country are within that belt. The St. Philip area, the St. George area, the St. Lucie area, the St. Peter area. So, member for St. Joseph, I assure you that that will not happen. You will still have a good base by which you will maintain your political reputation and indeed your clout with respect to residents going to those schools and marking that wonderful mark. Mr. Speaker, one of the areas that I wish to end on, because I will speak to 2 other things before I sit. The whole aspect of diversity of housing. We entered into a contract with East West Barbados to provide 150 light gauge steel houses. We also entered into a contract with Joe Guyana, to provide 350 hardwood houses. And Mr. Speaker, there are various options we are exploring with respect to the different types of housing and different design and various options that we would like to embark upon to provide housing solutions in this country. Not only housing solutions, affordable housing solutions. So as we cater to the new households, and as we cater to the aging population, persons living longer. This physical development plan, it is not late, but I can say to you, while this was work in progress, we were actively, Mr. Speaker, addressing the diversity and types of housing that we will offer to Barbadians to make housing affordable and indeed resilient. The use of renewable energy, Mr. Speaker, the use of renewable energy. The acronym HOPE stands for Ownership Providing Energy, and I know the members in this chamber would have heard this many times. But the art of repetition gets to the citizens more than speaking it once. We are utilizing renewable energy to drive the cost of housing down. And indeed, the aim is to utilize the photovoltaic on our rooftop to finance infrastructure and the cost of land. The net effect, those persons earning between $2,500 to $5,500 would indeed be only paying for the house. And the earnings, the PV earnings, will go towards, over a 25-year period, will go towards paying for the cost of the infrastructure and the cost of the land. So, Mr. Speaker, this is what we call innovation. This is something new, Mr. Speaker, to the world. And I'm saying, Mr. Speaker, the 154 houses that have been built at Lancaster, they all have owners. For that program, Mr. Speaker, and for that development at Vesper, Lancaster, where we're building 154 houses under the Hope Home Ownership Providing Energy option, we have over 4,000 applicants. So what I heard yesterday in certain quarters is not part of what is the reality in this country. We're oversubscribed for those houses, and that is the fourth option that I've presented here this morning, Mr. Speaker. This physical development plan also speaks to rent to own. And again, member for St. Peter, it is about our people. There may be a class of persons in this country, and there exists a class of persons in this country who will not be able to go to any lending institution and receive a mortgage or a loan because of their asset base and because of their earning potential. So what we have created, and it is articulated in this physical development plan for housing, under housing, the rent-to-own policy that this government has indeed created as a policy, where persons can begin to rent. It is all with a view to owning your own home. And thereafter, at some point in time when you have enough capital injected in the framework, you can go to one of the lending institutions and say to them, I am ready to own my own home. So you start out as a renter, and down the road, you say, hey, listen, look, I am ready to get a mortgage to own my own home. But you may be at a stage, Mr. Speaker, and why it is so powerful a policy initiative, you may be at the age of 40 when you start renting. And Mr. Speaker, when you go to the bank, you may be at 45. But you have equity in that house. So that equity in
The honourable member has 2 more minutes.
That equity in the house, Mr. Speaker, would allow you, therefore, to leverage to get that loan and get that mortgage. But also, Mr. Speaker, and that is why the new household is mentioned in this physical development plan. and housing catering to the new household. Because at that age, you may have 2 children coming along in the 20, 21 age group. So, Mr. Speaker, gone are the days when the average Barbadian will not be able to own their own home. And the policies that this government have embarked upon, those 20-year-olds with a mother or father that is 45 would then be able to say, hey, listen, look, I can assist mommy, and I can use my asset base as a new employee somewhere to help her improve her mortgage potential in terms of what she or him will qualify for. That is the family structure in this country, Barbados. So when we talk about family initiatives and community-based, the vision that the physical development plan has a community-based element in it, fostering family, strong family ties, strong ties within our communities, so that those ties will redound to home ownership in this country, as I simply put it over the last 2 minutes. So, Mr. Speaker, let me end by saying I am pleased with the work done by the team who crafted this lovely document. And it has given us hope, not only for housing, but it has given us hope for economic growth and for development in this country. And before I sit, Mr. Speaker, in 2018, in 2007, Mr. Speaker, we had some 4,000 applications approved by Town Planning Department, now the Physical Town Planning and Development Department. In the year 2007, we had 4,000 applications approved by Town Planning. Between the period 2010 to 2016, that number decreased by close to 50%. And it speaks to what was going on in the country between the years 2008 and 2018. Between 2010 and 2016, we had 2,500 applications approved by Town Planning. 25, down from 4,000 in 2007. But I end with the good news. Between 2018 and present, we have approved 9,617 applications. You heard that? We moved from 4,000 in 2007 under this administration. The years 2008 to 2018, what happened? We dropped to 2,500. And since the rebirth or the reemergence of a good government in 2018, we have seen 9,617 applications approved by the Town Planning Department. I congratulate the member for St. Michael Northeast again, who had responsibility for that department, along with the member for St. Michael South Central, and also my good friend for St. Michael West, who is now championing that cause. And I'm certain this 9,617 was propelled by the work he continues to do on behalf of the good citizens of this country. So, Mr. Speaker, this physical development plan sets out an orderly framework.
Honourable member, honestly, I think you don't understand the concept of 2 minutes. I think you thought I said 22 minutes. I was just checking.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I end, this physical development plan sets out an orderly framework for development in this country. Not only physical, but it puts the framework so that our legislative agenda will be implemented as we look at every single sector in this physical development plan, as we battle with our scarce land, water, and food. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Member for St. Michael's Southeast.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I do believe that this is such an important resolution that I would want to lend my voice in support of the efforts that have been made up until this point to be able to get this physical development plan before this chamber. I want to start by commending all of the persons who have worked tirelessly to get us to this point. Obviously, the senior minister, member for Christchurch West, has been very instrumental in leading the charge, not only as senior minister for infrastructure, but also with responsibility for bringing and tabling the physical development plan and seeing this process all the way through to fruition. So I would want to first, at the outset, extend my appreciation to him for following that process through. The process, Mr. Speaker, was one, I think, that allowed for the government of Barbados to demonstrate its willingness to consult with the people of Barbados in the similar vein that we have done in other aspects of governance. And I know that certainly once this is passed, I'm sure there will be additional discussions on the contents of this particular resolution and certainly the physical development plan. But I think for the most part, people have had the opportunity to be able to weigh in. And certainly in the course of this debate, and I suspect for the rest of today, the fact that we have the members of parliament representing 30 constituencies, there has been an equal opportunity for everybody, not just to speak to the broader policy, but specifically to speak to individual areas. Now, Mr. Speaker, I believe it was back in 2016, as a member of the then opposition, had the opportunity, along with some other members of the Barbados Labour Party, to visit the People's Republic of China. It was on that visit, Mr. Speaker, that I had the exposure to what I consider to be a very progressive way of allowing residents in various communities across China to understand and to appreciate what the government was doing in terms of development. I say that, sir, because I had the opportunity to see a number of, I guess you would call it, facilities where the plans for development of particular cities were laid out very clearly, sometimes in 3D, sometimes in the actual drawings, in sketches. Persons in various communities could actually go to these various halls and to, in a sense, understand better what the plans were by the government for the people in a particular district. I don't know that we have gotten to that point yet where we are so advanced that we have a lot of the visual presentations for the public to be able to understand exactly where this administration wants to take its people. Or do I think we have the level of intensity in terms of that detail that is necessary to take people where they are? A lot of people are very visual. So telling them to read, how many pages is it, Minister? This is a good over, I think, 300 pages of document to read. A lot of people will not read the documents. But I think what is important is if we can actually show through the community plans, the public over a period of time, the intention in terms of the spaces and how we intend to actually utilize the spaces. Now, Mr. Speaker, I have, I guess, a soft spot for this area too, because I now have responsibility for a number of the infrastructural areas, both water, wastewater, public transportation as well, which touches across the length and the breadth of Barbados. In other words, you can't get physical development unless you have infrastructure in place. So all of the cries that have been made, I think, by other honourable members, really it rests on what is done in terms of our improvements in terms of water and the delivery of water to households, the delivery of proper sanitation services and sewage systems to various households. It also depends on the connectivity that is required by way of the road infrastructure to and from particular communities to allow, of course, economic development. Because where you have roads, in turn, those persons are going to be able to engage in entrepreneurial activity and economic activity, and in turn, persons will be able to get into their communities as well. Because I have responsibility for those areas, Mr. Speaker, I think that I have perhaps a different viewpoint than most in terms of not just the significance of this document, but also some of the challenges as well that we have to overcome, because everybody can stand in this room and speak to all of the things in their constituencies that they would want to see happen. I think what, for me as Minister of Public Works in particular, is particularly telling by this document is the magnitude of the cost implications that are required to be able to get us where we want to, not in a year or 5 years, but certainly in 20, 30 years. And it will require significant investment in terms of from the economic perspective. It will require investment. It will require us being able to tap into financing globally to be able to access and unlock financing that will be able to help us to build out the roads and to build out the water resources and the sanitation. Because without all of those things, the document will not have any life breathed into it. And that is the reality. If we don't have the financing and we're not able to, in many cases, sometimes incur debt in order to be able to build out the capital projects, we will not be able to accomplish a lot of what is articulated in this particular development plan. Now, when it comes to roads, we have spoken a lot in the last few years. From the time we came to office, we were able to conclude negotiations in relation to a $230 million project for the Scotland district. And again, as the honourable member who spoke earlier, for the member for St. Joseph alluded to, the Scotland district required particular attention, not just a few years ago, but it required attention for a long time. The people of those communities have felt often as though they have been the forgotten communities of this country, and forgotten not because they don't have some of the most beautiful landscapes on the East Coast areas in particular, but forgotten because the lack of infrastructure and the upgrades that have not been taking place have made them feel as though they have been forgotten. Now, I think we have seen in the last few years a level of deterioration across the entire country that I'm sure gives them some reassurance that they themselves were not alone forgotten. But I think in the previous decade before we came to office, the whole country was certainly not a priority for the last administration in terms of its road infrastructure. I will continue to say that with 30 constituencies, there is no way that we can decide which constituency gets and which constituency doesn't, because you have a responsibility to all constituencies. But I will also keep saying that we have a certain amount of resources to play with as well. And so as it relates to the Scotland district, I was pleased to hear my colleague say that he does not expect that we're going to be able to do, in a sense, everything, and in particular that we would see relocation as a last resort. And I think that for the most part, certainly at Public Works, that is how we see the issue of relocation. Relocation is more of an issue of safety, making sure that people are not compromised in terms of land slippage in the Scotland district. And I must tell you that I am amazed sometimes when the honourable member for St. Andrew and I go on tour in these areas, because I am not so sure I would want to live in areas where people feel so comfortable saying that, you know, when they were growing up, there were fruit trees across the road and now there are none because the land slipped into the gully. I can't tell you I would feel comfortable. But there are people who for generations have lived in those areas, their foreparents have lived in those areas, and that is what they know. And they have come to an understanding that they want to remain in those communities. And that is what drives us in Public Works, that is what drives us as a government, to allow persons to remain where they have resided as safely as they possibly can, Mr. Speaker. Because each week, I can tell you that we are battling, because of climate change, we are battling as we try to build out a lot of what is in this physical development plan. We are battling with the issues of climate change and the impact that it is having on the road infrastructure, in particular within the Scotland district. We have had to spend a lot of time after we secured the loan trying to make sure that we do proper designs to enable us to be able to not waste the funds that have been made available. And I say waste because you know that these lands in the Scotland district will slip. And therefore, it is imperative that you have to get all of the geological tests done to determine what you are putting down in terms of the surface, and to make sure that it will last, maybe not for life, but that it will last for a period of time that will reflect the costs that we have incurred as a result of this expenditure. Where we have determined that we have to relocate people, it has been in situations where there's absolutely no choice. But I want to make it clear that the cost to keep people in place within the Scotland district is a costly one. And let us not make any mix any bones or any words on that. It is a costly exercise to be able to allow people to remain in place. But we as a party, and certainly as a government, have remained committed to that. One of the first things on coming to this ministry that we looked at was the White Hill area. The White Hill residents had been cast away, neglected. They were made to feel as though they were nobody. The roads were bad. They were not getting water at one point in the White Hill area. The garbage trucks could not go up the hill. And residents were made to feel as though they were forgotten, as though there would be no kind of infrastructural development in that area. Today, Mr. Speaker, I stand here proudly, certainly in speaking in this debate, to indicate that the steps have been taken to get us to where we are, almost at the end of phase 1 of the White Hill project. We have had some slippage along the way. We've had a little damage here and there to a house or two because of a number of fallen trees and again, the additional slippage. But we are starting to see light at the end of the tunnel in terms of the redevelopment of that area. We're not past the final phases as yet, because there are 3 phases to White Hill. So what you will see in White Hill is a total transformation. For those who have ever been to the area, you will see the total transformation of a community that now we have paid attention to being able not just to improve the access to water, but also to improve as well the road infrastructure to allow those persons who can remain in the area to be able to remain in that particular community. When you take the King Street area as well, Mr. Speaker, again, another challenging location. We have had some challenges there with the slippage, and a lot of the areas that are of concern in the Scotland district relate to drainage, because the texture of the soil ends up, if you don't have the correct piping and stuff available, and certainly the gabion work in place, you will find yourself in a situation where the water basically settles in the soil. And as a consequence, you will find that there is lots of flooding and compromising of the structures. So we've had to revisit from time to time certain areas within the King Street area. We now have better designs being done for that area, which has had the support and the input of the soil conservation. We've been working very closely with them, along with the Chinese team, and certainly our internal engineers as well. But I speak to this, sir, because I want people to understand the complexity of fulfilling this physical development plan. If we are to keep people where they live in these communities, one will come at a cost, and it will require the best in terms of expertise, in terms of engineers, to be able to allow us to understand better the types of soils that we are working with as well. So moving out people is not a first option, but keeping people safe is the priority for which all of us have been working in relation to these particular areas. I would like to see, sir, I know that there was supposed to be an entity set up which would have overseen the Scotland district, and I really do think that if we can find the resources, that we need to seriously look at putting that in place to be able to manage better the issues of slippage in that particular district. Because while we deal with roads, there's also still a lot of gabion work and a lot of stabilization work that has to be done in that area. And that must go hand in hand with the works and the expenditure that we are putting at this present moment into that particular area. The other challenge that we come across from time to time is the discovery as we walk along the road. We discover water just running along the side of the road that nobody don't know where it comes from. Sometimes there are different views as to where it is emanating from. It could be sewage water, it could be water runoff from somebody's washing machine. It could also be a spring. And we are finding ourselves, as we are building out the Scotland district in terms of the roads, having to again pause at times to investigate the sources of water in the various districts. We have to talk to people in the communities. We have to try to dig a little deeper in terms of our investigative tests to be able to figure out where water is coming from and how to divert the water in a different direction. That takes time, Mr. Speaker, and if we are really and truly to fulfill all of what we want to do in terms of, again, keeping people in place, it is important that we have the best in the business, the best minds, the best experts to be able to guide us along the way on these issues. The Scotland district is unique, and I think that we have had to treat it in that way. We have a number of projects beyond the King Street and the Whitehill area. We would have done Shorey Village and Vaughan's Road. Number 2 is almost near completion. There's still some work to be done down there, but significant work has in fact been done in that particular area. And we have had along the way to reprioritize some of the works simply because the rain has not been cooperating with our teams, because in many cases, the areas that would have been prioritized in stage 3 or stage 4, because of the heavy rains, we have had to now reprioritize those areas. In addition to which, we have seen an acceleration of deterioration of some of our bridges. And that has also, and even the retaining structures, we've had to put in place systems within the Complant project to raise a higher level of urgency in relation to certain areas. Again, I think it is important that the public appreciates that when we have these challenges, that you cannot just simply go in the next day and fix the area. You have to do your designs, you have to do your testing, you have to do your engineering assessment in order to make the right decisions so that you can rebuild. So I know that there is sometimes inconvenience and dislocation in terms of people getting to and from communities or roads becoming from 2 lanes to 1 lane. But in many cases, when you see the signage erected by whether it's MTW or the Complant team, what we are actually working on behind the scenes at the moment is trying to make sure that we have a quick design done to be able to accelerate the process of those works. Because I, like most Barbadians, I get very frustrated when I see what I call the DNA of MTW, which is a can in the road for months, if not years. So what we're trying to do going forward is to solve the problems and create a level of urgency for those areas in particular which have been compromised for a while and which we need to have urgently done. But that requires us, as I said, to ensure that we have the designs done. Fortunate for us, we've had detailed designs done for a number of areas. We brought up about 15 locations within the Scotland district because we recognized that if these areas were not addressed, we were going to find ourselves locking off various communities. And I just want to say that there's no way that we can fix every single road all at the same time. So we have to at times determine what are the priority areas, which roads are going to cut off an entire community if we do not prioritize it. Equally, we've had to build bypass roads. And for those who live along the area by the Thompson Bridge down Bruceville, or Bruceville Bridge, you will find now that a bypass road has been provided there. The parliamentary secretary and member for St. Andrew has been on the ground tirelessly almost every day dealing with these issues. And I really want to take the opportunity to thank him for the stellar work that he's been doing in the ministry, because he has remained true to his roots in terms of making sure that the people in the Scotland district are properly looked after in relation to this project. But we've had to build bypass roads. And why we have to do the bypass roads in some cases, as I said, because we have to get connectivity from one district to the other. We also have to make sure that while we prepare for the bridge to be installed, that there has to be the design done. The bridges have to come into the country, which means they have to be prefabricated in order to come into the island. We also have to do the civil works components that are required in order to place those bridges in the respective positions. Again, Mr. Speaker, I say that because I think sometimes in our haste to see development, we do not often appreciate what has to take place behind the scenes in order for us to get to the destination. And I think it is my responsibility to make sure that people understand that while there is often agitation about this road not being done and that road being cut off and this road being closed, that presently we have something that we did not have before, which is the ability financially to be able to start the process of making and addressing a number of the concerns that we've had for almost decades across a number of these areas, and in particular in the Scotland district. You also have Borden's Bridge, which again, we had to do some temporary work there, but we are in the process of having the bridge prefabricated. Again, as I think the member for St. Joseph spoke of the issue of buses. Many of these roads, yes, we've invested in the electric buses, but many of these roads, if we are not able to secure the bridges, then we will also have a direct impact on the ability of the buses to be able to get into the various communities. So I say and share this, sir, because I feel it is important that the people in the Scotland district understand that there is a plan, there is a working plan that we have in terms of being able to pull the infrastructure that is necessary in the area, while at the same time appreciating that it is not an overnight process and that we need to take some time to make sure that we get it right. Otherwise, you will see failures, and then there will be the allegations of expenditure that perhaps was unnecessarily spent. We've had a few areas in recent times as well, like Erie Hill, Horse Hill, that we've seen some challenges as well arising. And again, we've had to respond to those on a regular basis as well. But the priority projects that I'm hoping will be able to roll out for 2024, we have looked at the White Hill Phase 2 area, and obviously the designs are in place for Phase 3 as well. Glen Burnie, St. Margaret's, the area of St. Simon's, Highway F, Coggins Hill, of course the Bruce Brill Bridge, Babylon Road, and Bloomsbury. And I think the Honourable Member in particular, Bloomsbury, the Honourable Member for St. Thomas will be pleased to hear that as well. But we also took a look at roads that could take more of a mill and pave, that were not as complex as some of these ones that I have called just now. We looked at roads that I think, having started this process and gone for what I consider to be the most complex areas, King Street and White Hill, we recognized as a team that we needed to address as well some of the more simple areas in terms of construction. Not that you don't have slippage and not that you don't have soft spots, but many of the areas that would allow us to get a quick mill and pave and addressing of drainage issues in those communities. So we've looked at Reese Road, Highway 2B, Chance Hall to Josie Hill, Highway 1C, which is the Clinkits to Spring Hall area, the Bathsheba area, Fore Hill to Indian Ground, Mount Brevita, Sailor Gully, Orange Hill, the Animal Flower Cave, and Highway Z, which I think is the Bathsheba area, as I said before. And we've done that, Mr. Speaker, because while this administration has prioritized what I consider to be the worst areas, we have also had to make sure that people start to feel as though the $230 million is actually being spent in their communities as well. And I make no bones about that, sir, because we have another phase of roads right now that we are prioritizing from the list. Some of them that we prioritized previously have either had to be accelerated or they have had to go down the list because there are others that have had to go up. But what we keep having to do is in the dry months, which will be hopefully from January onwards for about 6 months, those are the times where you will start to see an acceleration of works within the Scotland district. During those months as well, the design team will also be working on the preparation of the designs and doing the testing on the next set of roads, because we recognize from what has happened in the last year in particular that it is becoming more unpredictable in terms of us being able to do work within the Scotland district. Certainly, even to do pothole patching, it becomes unpredictable, because even just getting the factory to kick up so that we can actually get the asphalt, a lot depends on whether the weather is working with us on any given day, Mr. Speaker. So I share that, sir, because I know people are asking the questions, well, you know, how are we going to stay true to this physical development plan? How are we looking to develop it? Well, that is the starting point. Now, that is not to say that the Scotland district alone is the focus of this administration. And I mentioned those roads simply to allay those concerns of those who live in those areas. But we also had acquired monies under the CAF project as well through the Latin American Bank. And, you know, I don't know if the announcement has been made, but Barbados now sits on the board of CAF, which is a significant achievement for Barbados, because they have supported us not only in relation to financing for road infrastructure, but they have also supported us in relation to water infrastructure as well in this country. And the financing obviously works to our advantage in terms of the interest payments that we have to pay back. It is important, Mr. Speaker, that people appreciate that even with the CAF roads, and you've seen a number of them, the Rockdando, the Prior Park, Yorkshire Road, what? Cane Garden to Bridgefield, Shop Hill to Contensor. Those last two are the next that will be starting shortly. The member for St. Thomas does not need to rise in here today and raise a list of roads that require being done in St. Thomas. I assure her and the residents of St. Thomas that her cries have been heard loudly, and what has been taking place over the last few months has really been the preparatory work to be able to allow us to roll out a number of roads within the Scotland district under both compliant and under both CAF as well, sir. And she is not singled out in this chamber, because others are passionate within the Scotland district about their roads. But as I said, we have had to prioritize, make some changes, be able to get additional experts in to assist us. And of course, the Honourable Member for St. Peter is not to be left out. I think, Mr. Speaker, I took abusing at one parliamentary group meeting. In my absence, of course, because I would abuse back. But abusing because of the roads in St. Peter. And rightly so, because that is what he's been sent here to do, to highlight the roads that require to be done.
I don't know the Honourable Member for St. Peter to use curse words, do I?
He prayed after he abused me, sir.
I believe so. I think he prayed rather than abused.
But we do recognize the importance of St. Lucie, St. Peter, St. Thomas, St. Andrew, in being able, and St. James, in being able to address the concerns of the residents in those areas. And we have started even the paving, because again, basic things, it may not be the major road infrastructure, but we have put our paving teams on a schedule now to be able to bring relief to a number of the various areas that have been on a list for quite a long time, sir. So there are some changes that are taking place within MTW to bring relief to a number of the districts. I can also say that I've delivered on the promise made to the people of this country to have Highway 7, the portion that we had said was perhaps the worst in terms of the condition, addressed. The Honourable Member for Christchurch West is very happy about that, as it's in his constituency. But I think most Barbadians are happy about that section of the road that has actually been addressed. Let me just say that, as we build out the infrastructure of the country, the road infrastructure, I don't know if at times people appreciate the preparatory work that has to go in. And I say that sincerely because even on the South Coast, I think one of the decisions that needed to be taken was whether the timing in terms of when do we actually start these works, because we had the South Coast Sewage Project as well to be done. And the Honourable Member for Christchurch West, I think when he was Minister, also wanted us to be able to do an overlay similar to what I've just done on the South Coast Road. Now, we had to balance whether the design work had been done, the timing in terms of when the actual works would commence. And now once we've gotten the actual timelines for when works can start in 2025, it allowed us to be in a better position to determine whether we could go ahead and put some resources into doing an overlay of that road to bring some relief to the residents. Now, the work for the South Coast Sewage Project is ongoing. We've been able to secure the financing for that. And again, we are hopeful that that project now can get going to be able to, again, address what is in the physical development plan, which is an improvement in our infrastructure from a primary treatment plant to a tertiary treatment plant in this country. We also have work ongoing for the Bridgetown sewage treatment plant as well. Because, sir, I don't know if people realize as well, but in order for us to talk about development, we have to be mindful that because we are trying to accelerate our works, our housing program, that if we cannot get the housing built as quickly as we would like, people are going to make their own determination as to where they live. And you heard the Honourable Minister for Housing speak to the issue of squatting. We've had to, in a sense, either move people from settlements because they have squatted, or in some cases we'd have to find ways to improve the conditions in which people have settled because it would be too costly to be able to move them to another area. So places like Bailey's Alley, the sewering that has to be done in the Chapman Lane area, the Bell area, these are all things that are mentioned in the physical development plan, sir. And I know the Honourable Member for St. Michael East is livid at times when he knows how long these issues have taken to come to fruition. And I will keep saying in this chamber, so long as I have breath in my body, the people in those communities will have the completion of those designs for the areas so that we can have the proper sewering, because we can't move them anywhere out of those areas. And Mr. Speaker, you have persons in your communities as well that fall within that category too. They have settled in these areas, and they have settled because we do not have places to put them. They can't find places to rent. In many cases, we don't have the accommodation to build out to be able to facilitate persons across the country. And we have to be realistic about that. It means that with the new technologies that exist, we have had to look at different types of sewage systems to be able to facilitate settlements in certain areas that ordinarily we would not have had. We have had to change the water zoning that would have existed for decades in this country. And I would have brought that bill a few months ago to this chamber, which would have been passed to allow for, again, a reduction in the areas that once would have prevented people from being able to build. Because, sir, when the physical development plans were first envisaged, Barbados was predominantly an agricultural community. We have since seen the transition with more of the population coming on stream. We have seen an increase in obviously people moving out of the city areas into other areas and creating settlements. And therefore, any administration worth its salt has to pay attention to the changes that are taking place in a country and either be proactive to move people to other settled areas or to find the technologies that are necessary once it is safe to do so to be able to keep persons in those areas. And that, Mr. Speaker, is what we have started to do. So for me, the physical development plan is a live document because I can speak with clarity that in MTW and the Ministry of Public Works that we are, and at the Barbados Water Authority, that we are actively ensuring that the housing that is being done by the Honourable Minister and all the work that is being done by the Minister, Senior Minister responsible for infrastructure, that we are able to provide the water and the roads and the utilities to be able to allow development to take place, sir. Now, I want to talk quickly about the issue of what we've been doing at BWA to make sure that people get access to water. Because in all of what we discussed in the physical development plan, water is a critical factor in being able to have development taking place in all of these areas, all of the communities that we've spoken about, all of the town plans that we have. Nothing can happen, sir, unless we have access to water. But our reality is also that we have 100-year-old mains. Our reality is that we have to change out 3-inch to 20-inch pipes. Our reality is that even with all the best intentions, our human resources within the Barbados Water Authority will not allow us to replace all the mains to allow for even road infrastructure to take place at an accelerated pace. That is our reality, sir. But we have started the process, and for every road that we have been doing, whether it has been under the IDB project, whether it has been under the Complant project, or whether it has been under the CAF project, in addition to the roads and the inconvenience that Bajans will complain about, the reality is that we have also been able to change out the mains in all of those locations to ensure that we are allowing for a reduction in the loss of water through our pipes. Now, it comes with its challenges, Mr. Speaker. And some of those challenges are that when you change, with all the best intentions, you change the mains, you end up in a situation where down the road, where those mains haven't been changed, you end up with breaks in the system. And that is why people get the discolored water. That is why they complain for the brown water, because the pace at which we need to be able to change out our mains, we do not have the resources presently to be able to do it. But we are, in a sense, working with BWA, we're working with the private contractors. We have found new ways now to work together as well, to ensure that we can repair the road infrastructure while at the same time being able to have the mains laid to accelerate our ongoing roads program. We have 2,500 kilometers of road, Mr. Speaker, that we have to change. We have, as a government, looked, since we have come to office, at building out the reservoir capacity. We've had 10 reservoirs that we've rehabilitated. We've erected some 4 tanks as well under the Water Supply Network Upgrade Project, which was funded by the Caribbean Development Bank. We have also done another 6 reservoirs and 16 kilometers of mains in the communities of St. Joseph, St. Andrew, and St. Lucie. We have increased the number of pumping stations to 5. We have upgraded the wastewater equipment, upgraded the lifting equipment at 3 of the pumping stations, and there is currently ongoing a portable and sanitation master plan, which there has been in progress, which we are hoping will govern the way in which we deal with water management over the course of the next 30 years, Mr. Speaker. This document is a live and a real document for the Ministry of Transport Works and Water Resources. We have also looked at improvements to the redundancy of storage on the island as well, because, you know, we take for granted, I think, where our water comes from. And that if we are finding, or we find ourselves in a situation of a drought, that we have to make sure that we have adequate storage to be able to supply water to homes across Barbados. We have constructed 5 precast concrete storage tanks, varying in size from 685,000 to 1.5 imperial gallons. And these are at Castle Grant, Apes Hill, Shop Hill, Rising Sun, and Walkers, sir. And on the cards also is the issue of desalination, because we recognize that, again, we already have that on island, which I must tell you, compared to other jurisdictions, Barbados is certainly far ahead in terms of its infrastructure. A lot of times when I go to the water conferences, I feel as though, you know, while we have our challenges, we are in a lot of ways in a better position than a lot of the other countries, certainly in Latin America and even in the rest of the Caribbean, sir. It is not to say that we must sit on our laurels, because I think we all know that we have to improve what we have, but at the same time, I can say to you with all sincerity that Barbados is still doing a lot better and has benefited from the hard-working persons in the water sector, and certainly by the Honourable Prime Minister, sir, who has been leading the charge on climate change and being able to create the advocacy that is necessary to enable us to get the necessary financing to do a lot of the work that we have to do and that lies ahead for this country as well. We have to put in some more desalination plants. We have plans for those in the north of the island. And I'm sure the Honourable Member for St. Lucie will be quite happy about that in due course, because they will no doubt be at 2 sites in his constituency. One will be a brackish and a seawater plant. But again, sir, these are all things that are taking place while this document has been being created. We brought the water reuse legislation that has passed this chamber. We've encouraged people to do the water harvesting. All of these things are layers in being able to allow us to bring to life the physical development plan that is before this chamber. Now, Mr. Speaker, the last point that I would want to make on this particular resolution is one that touches very near and dear to my heart. I heard the Honourable Minister of Housing speak to the issue of housing, and I appreciate that we are on a very ambitious program to be able to build out housing in this country. For me, no physical development plan can satisfy the residents of St. Michael's Southeast, of which I represent, unless there is a dedicated program specifically for the largest housing area in the country, as well as for all of the other housing areas across this country as well. While my people are not subjected to issues of slippage, and while the roads may not be in the worst condition as they are in some other areas, sir, what they suffer from is housing that was built in the 60s, housing that was built with structures that the integrity sometimes is called into question. They suffer from, as the minister has said, we've been able to reduce the number of persons who, the applications, but we have still a long way to go in being able to solve the problems in relation to housing of persons who live on the housing estate, sir. One of the solutions that this administration has looked at, and I would want to encourage those who have the ability to press the accelerator on it, would be the issue of identifying lands to be able to allow us to build out housing faster. We've acquired the lands in Lower Burney. I think the environmental impact assessment is ongoing. And the intention there, sir, was to be able to move some of the residents in densely populated areas of the communities of St. Michael's Southeast and the surrounding areas to a better and improved location. Sir, if you take a journey with me through St. Michael's Southeast, you will find in the areas of Princess Royal and Golden Rock, York Terrace, you will find a number of very old structures, both in terms of plumbing, both in terms of sewage. Sometimes you can go through the area, you can see open pipes that we constantly have to call the NHC to be able to address. You have, because of the increase in the number of people living in those areas, sir, you have the increase in the number of sewage that you would ordinarily have been going to one particular well. And it requires a constant maintenance, it requires a constant pumping off, sir. We have started the electrical upgrades, and I'm grateful that we have been able to accomplish that thus far, because I'm seeing those works bringing some benefit to the people, because again, I think none of us would want any electrical fires to be taking place in communities when they could have been avoided. But again, I say that for units that have been built in the 60s, and in many cases, you can't find a steel inside of these structures, I would want to urge the Honourable Minister and the Attorney General to accelerate the program to be able to not only convey what can be conveyed to allow people to own their homes, but also to let us accelerate the processes to ensure that we can assess the integrity of these structures. Because it may very well be that there may be more people who may have to be relocated than we may have initially anticipated. All along Pine Plantation Road, sir, the houses there's a plan by the Ministry of Housing for those to be demolished, because they were also built poorly. And I do not believe that because you are poor, because you are vulnerable, that we must place people in accommodation that is inadequate for them, sir. I know that the efforts are being made, but my call is simply one for a greater degree of urgency, because I am seeing an acceleration of the deterioration of the conditions in a number of these structures. So 5 years ago, we had a little bit of time. But 5 years from now, if we do not ensure that we have the Juravilla project and the East-West project and others built out in real time to accelerate the housing accommodation that is needed in this country, then, sir, I fear that we will have other issues that we're going to have to deal with in terms of structural integrity in a lot of these households. As I said, the work has started, but there is still, I think that we need a dedicated team to be able to look at whether it is repairs, where there can be repairs on some of the structures, but perhaps an assessment of what is the magnitude of what we are looking at in the housing estates. Because I know the Pine is not the only one, but we may need to seriously reconsider and to assess properly these units to determine the structural integrity and whether what we are handing over to people is actually something that is worth handing over. Because we may very well find that the number of persons who will require accommodation in another 5 or 10 years may actually be significantly higher than what we had initially anticipated. So, sir, I am happy that my government is doing what it is supposed to, because we had wells that were uncovered in St. Michael Southeast. They have been covered. What I want, though, is that we maintain our estates. And this is a cry across government. Maintenance is something that we seem not to be good at. We're not good at it in MTW. We're not good at it in education. We're not good at it in any of the ministries, housing. We're not good at it, and we need to get better at it. We need to look very carefully at how do we alleviate some of these environmental conditions that are plaguing our schools, that are plaguing our offices, that are plaguing our communities, sir. Because I know the senior minister is looking into how we address these problems, sir, but this is an urgent matter that I think we have to put all heads together to be able to figure out how to address it. It pains me that children, despite all the work that we did in education, all the money that was spent, we still have the issue that we have across our school infrastructure. And we have it not because money wasn't spent to do works, you know, Mr. Speaker. We have it because the issue of maintenance continues to be put on the back burner. Sometimes it gets put into estimates, sometimes it gets taken out in the hope that you make money to be able to put it back in. And I speak it candidly because I know from personal experience, we spent money on our school infrastructure. We upgraded the electricals in our schools. We rebuilt buildings. All St. John's Primary, Luther Thorne, there was work that was done at all of those institutions, Mr. Speaker. But where we fall down constantly is on the issue of maintenance and routine maintenance, people going and checking the roads, people going and making sure and checking and writing down what has to be done, and then being able to take that information and put it in a form that we can send a team of people out to be able to do the works. That is where we must now address our minds, because I think all of us are feeling the repercussions of not having those systems in place. And it pains me to know that we are losing days because teachers are out, because children are out, you know, because we are not maintaining our structures. We have been the recipients of infrastructure deterioration as a result of an administration who failed to replace and to repair and to rehabilitate infrastructure. So we know what we have inherited. When people are talking, I am clear in my mind how we got to where we got to. But all I will say, sir, is that we have to pay more attention to the systems that are there to maintain and to provide that oversight and supervision over the services that are provided. Mr. Speaker, I want to support this resolution and to again thank the Honourable Senior Minister for being able to bring it to this place. I support also the development of the cities. I think that there is lots to be done in terms of improvements, and perhaps sometimes we as a government need to follow some of the practices of the people. And I say that with all sincerity. There are a number of areas, and I would mention in particular the area down by Pebbles Beach, where that has developed with a number of kiosks, a number of vendors. And I honestly believe, I've said it to my colleagues in cabinet, that I believe that areas like that, where people have, in a sense, flocked to an area and started their own development, we must then follow with our own physical development plans and build on what is there, sir. There's an area out there by, the tire shop out there by Target Hall, coming out from the Ivy. Again, the people have developed the area. All we need to do is to put in the infrastructure to be able to improve on what people have already done. People are already going there. They don't need nothing new. They need an improvement, a car park, they need bathroom facilities, they need lighting. And we need to pay attention to that so long as there are no implications in terms of our water table and contamination of our water, that we seek to regularize the spaces that people already are in. And I know we are doing a lot of work in terms of vending to be able to improve those areas. But again, like most other things in government, we need to move a little faster on a lot of the permissions that need to be provided in order to accelerate the designs and to get those works done. Because again, with the time that it takes for government to get these things finalized, the people have already determined where they are going and setting up their coconut vending stalls and all of their kiosks. So we need to flip the equation now, and we need to be more proactive in the way that we approach development, because in many cases, nobody has read this book. Nobody has read these 300 pages to determine where the Honourable Minister and the rest of us want development to take place. They don't reference that when they go to squat. They don't reference it when they go to put up a vending stall. And therefore, we must also see physical development as also development that in many cases is led by the people. And we must be able to respond to what the people of this country also require of us to do, and to ensure that those spaces where they wish to be developed are also safe spaces as well. So, Mr. Speaker, with those few words, I am obliged and I support this resolution. Thank you.
Honourable for St. James North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to support this resolution and to commend the Honourable Senior Minister Member for Christchurch West and his team for bringing this to fruition and bringing this for debate in this Parliament. 300 pages of a physical development plan, the first in 20 years, so it's a major effort. And of course, physical development plan transcends all aspects of Barbados and our people in terms of their living standards and in terms of the improvement of their conditions of life. This document was crafted after extensive consultation and engagement with all stakeholders. They had town hall meetings, input of the public. I know mention was made that in fact the public's input was able to shift and be reflected in this document. And that is what governance is about, especially in a case with a party with all the seats in Parliament. It has to engage the public for their views, and that is what this government has done more than any other government in the past in terms of most aspects of our development, in terms, of course, of the economy and education and housing and persons with disabilities, to use a few examples. This document addresses issues such as land scarcity for agricultural land, and that's major. Subdivisions of affordable housing, again, major. Provision of housing for people is, I consider, certainly one of the foremost challenging aspects of our governance and of our development. It addresses transportation challenges, confronting issues of pertaining to our climate crisis, because that is why I call it a climate crisis rather than climate change. Transitioning to a green economy, biodiversity issues, and protecting our cultural heritage, sir. In fact, all 17 sustainable development provisions would be addressed in some way or another in this document. the 17 Sustainable Development Provisions as crafted in 2015 by the United Nations to be achieved, we aim by 2030. And so I just wanted to say, not diverting, but it is pertinent on the issue of the Samoa Agreement, sir, which of course addresses all, certainly if not most, of those 17 Sustainable Development Goals. A treaty convention agreement signed on the 15th of November by members of the African, Caribbean, Pacific states and the European Union, the 27 European Union countries. Barbados signed it on the 15th of November in Samoa. And I want to commend the government for going ahead and signing this document. I believe the intention of Senior Minister, the Honourable Member of Parliament for St. James Central, Minister with responsibility for Foreign Affairs, is to bring this document to Parliament by resolution so a debate could be done on it, because we all know that there are persons within what I call the fundamental right-wing community, sir, who have issues with it on two or three matters, sir, perhaps. And so we're here to, as leaders, political leaders of our country, to try to convince them that there's nothing to be afraid of with this document or to be concerned of in terms of what they're talking about. But the fundamental issue as well, sir, is that all of our people in this country, indeed all people of the world, have basic human rights. And just on Sunday, there was the 75th anniversary of the original signatures of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, coming out, of course, of the United Nations in the post-World War II period. Honourable Member for St. Peter, and in fact addressed Canadian United Nations gathering yesterday on this, at which the Honourable Member for St. Michael South and I were present, sir. And everyone has to be given human rights. And the God that I know, sir, the God that I know, because I should have been, from all intents and purposes, I've been told by my parents, I should have died in my mom's childbirth. I almost died at birth. So the God that I know, who has taken me for 62 years so far, believes that everyone should have human rights, and that, for example, persons with disabilities or persons, consenting adults, sir, consenting adults who may not be involved in straight sex relations have basic human rights too. And I, as a black person whose ancestors went through slavery, the greatest crime, international crime against humanity, sir, has to believe that everyone has basic human rights, sir. And therefore, sir, I commend this government on agreeing to sign the Samoa Agreement, even if all members of the African, Caribbean, Pacific states, as of now, have not signed it, sir. But I want to look at some specific areas of this physical development plan, use of agricultural land, housing, water zones, housing and lands, how this document pertains to persons with disabilities, and the issue of enfranchisement of our population, the most vulnerable of our population in terms of property, sir. Because this this plan is nothing but for pertaining to the development and improvement in the lives of our people, sir. And that's what this part is about, sir. In terms of agriculture, the issue here is that since the last Physical Development Plan of 2003, agricultural land has been reduced by 53%, sir, through conversion to other uses. Many reasons for that, sir. We know that up to the late 1960s, we used to reap over 200,000 tons of sugar. But global dynamics, sir, where we lost preferences for our sugar and bananas, and just a fundamental shift in how the world operates in terms of its trading, sir. And other issues has caused this demise. One of the issues, sir, that has caused the demise too is the extremely myopic policy of the last Democratic Labour Party government that found it fit to send back to their CARICOM countries, especially Guyana, sir, persons who were involved in agricultural production here and who were doing very well, sir. Not causing any problems, not taking up jobs that Barbadians wanted, sir. But that was the policy of the late David Thompson and the Frontal Shore administration. Ever so welcome wait for a call, and it caused fundamental damage to our economy and to our agricultural sector, among other sectors, sir. So it is the remit of the Honourable Member for St. Philip South, as Minister of Agriculture, to try and bring still sustainable agriculture to our country. And I want to support him in terms of increasing our production capacity and capabilities in that regard. What I would say certainly is everyone who certainly has a genuine interest in agricultural development ought to be given that opportunity through the government departments to do so. And there has to be that capacity, because I know in my constituency, for instance, there are people who are willing to go into agriculture. A lot, let's face it, sir. In addition, is, I suppose, psychological too. A lot of present Barbadians don't want to get into agriculture because of historical factors and the association with colonialism and slavery, but money can be made in it. And it is a noble career, sir, for those. What has to be done is smart agriculture, I believe, rather than this hard labor agriculture, and I believe that's what we're moving towards. So we have to still maintain certain of our lands for agricultural production. I believe, again, from around 1980, the amount of agricultural land in use has declined from 44% of our land surface to 26% today. But food security is major. A country must have food security to be able to survive. It is fundamental, in fact, to our national security. And in a situation where I believe our food import bill is upwards of $800 million a year, we have to reduce that, because that is a serious dent on our economic capacity as well. The issue of housing and land, sir, again, extremely critical, and we have to find some mechanism to utilize these over 20,000 vacant lots, mainly, I believe, in urban Barbados, that we have across our island. And I know this is not an easy solution to devise. We've been talking about it for years, how to now claim for the benefit and on behalf of the people of Barbados these vacant lots, in some cases containing derelict houses, which for one reason or another, in a lot of cases where the owner died and is tied up in terms of succession complications, land taxes not being paid, for instance, in a lot of cases, a bush 10 feet high causing problems to to the neighbors, sir. And I obviously, sir, I understand the legal difficulties in devising a scheme whereby these lands could be used for the benefit of the state now, and through the state on behalf of the people, but we have to come up with a solution, because in an era where said housing is major challenge and land acquisition is also a major challenge, we have to find a way to be able to utilize this within the physical development of Barbados. The issue, sir, of water zones, again, is key. The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister, three months ago, brought to this Parliament the Barbados Water Authority Amendment Bill. And under that bill, of course, there is provision for the Honourable Minister to make an order to reclassify and rezone the traditional zones 1 to 5 to zones A to E, I think it is, or A to F. And I really wish to urge the Honourable Minister to urge her ministry officials to have this process speeded up, sir. Meaning St. James North, a lot of St. James North is under Zone 1 still. I was in Upper Carlton only on Sunday afternoon, and someone, a resident there, asked me when will she be able to get water supply directly to her house, sir. I could have been in Rotterdam, sir. I could have been in the Wim. I could have been in Aston Hall and be asked that same question. And quite honestly, sir, in this day and age, we have to be able to bring water facilities to these people. I know that we are trying our best. There is an issue. It was one of the first tasks that I sought to address when I became a member of Parliament, 11 years ago now almost, and when I went around to different government departments, and I went around to the Town Planning and Barbados Water Authority to try to see where this process was. So I really hope and trust that early in the new year that the Honourable Minister would be able to say that she has signed the order to relieve effectively many of the districts in my constituency from this prohibition to have inborn water facilities and water supply, sir. Because we're talking about decent humanity, and that's what this government's goal and thrust is and has to be. So in terms of how this document that we're debating affects the issue of persons with disabilities, the Honourable House, and by extension Barbados would have heard the Honourable Member for St. James South, the Minister for Housing earlier today, speak to the policy of government now to ensure that 10% of state housing, either houses built by National Housing Corporation or houses which come under the auspices of the government, will be allocated to persons with disabilities. Extremely important, sir. And he spoke about the practical implementation of that policy, starting with Arlene's land in White Park Road. So this policy has to continue, sir, and we have to ensure that it would continue, sir. In addition, of course, it is access of persons with disabilities to the built environment and natural environment, sir. So the Cabinet of Barbados, 4 months ago, would have approved the national policy to improve the lives of persons with disabilities, which emanated from the committee, National Advisory Committee, which I had the honor of chairing, sir, and within that policy document, there is provision for equality of persons with disabilities, equity, non-discrimination, participation in every aspect of Barbadian lives, and that therefore includes in that policy, sir, that public places ought to be adapted within the medium term, sir, that persons with disabilities, whether blind persons or persons in wheelchairs, immobility challenge, will be able to have access to these places. Once it's a public place, whether it's the law courts, sir, parliament, supermarkets, sir, you're going to be given time, sir, once the draft legislation comes before this parliament and eventually is enacted, you'll be given time to adapt, retrofit your place, make it accessible to persons with disabilities, but it has to come because we can't leave anyone behind in our national development, and persons with disabilities have the basic human and fundamental rights to be included in all aspects of our development, sir. In terms of the natural environment, sir, issues, persons with disabilities have to be able to participate in sports and in culture, sir. So, and our community centers, I know the older community centers would need to be adapted to accommodate persons in wheelchairs, and there was the commitment when we met with the Honourable Minister for Community Development last year and his team to have that done. We know it'll take time, sir. These things can't happen overnight, sir. So there's some issues that would not be short-term within the 7-year period of the implementation of the national policy document 2023 to 2030, but would be medium-term and maybe even long-term, sir. But it has to be done. So I know, for example, when the new national stadium is built, the Honourable Member for St. John will ensure that all parts of it are accessible to persons with disabilities. Sir, in terms of the enfranchisement of, and in terms of persons with disabilities, sir, this is my first opportunity, sir, because we didn't meet last week, to again commend the Honourable Minister for People Empowerment, the member for St. Michael South, and the Cabinet of Barbados, sir, for recognizing persons with disabilities, those who have assisted persons with disabilities, and the Honourable Member for St. Thomas, because I understand that the conceptualization, if not how it was eventually devised and crafted, emanated from the Honourable Member for St. Thomas when she was Minister of People's Empowerment in the last term of office. But the understanding and the coming to the position where persons with disabilities, people who have served in the cause for their advancement are recognized, is extremely noble, sir. And of course, on International Day for Persons with Disabilities, December 3rd, a wall was unveiled with the names of 45 persons, some no longer with us, but most still alive, who have served in that cause, sir. And on behalf of all my fellow recipients of that title now, the Hero of Persons with Disabilities, I wish to say thank you and to commend the government on that, sir. The certificate that was given to me has pride of place among, as I said, the more than 24 certificates that are hung up in my study, sir. In terms of enfranchisement of our population, in terms of property, sir, this is so important. We know that our country, in terms of land mass, is only 166 square miles. In terms of maritime mass, is a lot more than that, I believe 400 square miles. And therefore, there will always be the conflict in a country of our small size in terms of balancing issues between agricultural development, housing, everything else, but enfranchisement of our people, those who are not traditional landowners, those who are descendants of slaves less than 200 years ago. It has to be fundamental. And this party, sir, in government, whenever it has been in government, has championed those people, sir, starting from the Tenantries Freehold Purchase Act of 1981, sir. We, on this side, regard that as one of the transformational pieces of legislation that has passed through this parliament since adult suffrage just over 70 years ago, sir. And we continued, of course, with that transformational policy when there was the government of the Right Honourable Owen Arthur in terms of bringing then not only plantation tenantries but urban tenantries into that, with tenants being able to purchase at $2.50 a square foot, with government subsidizing the rest. But two issues here, sir, that I want to draw the attention. One is in terms of private concerns, sir. And the Honourable Prime Minister has quite rightly, sir, raised the issue internationally of reparations to our the former colonies of the United Kingdom and the European powers, newly independent countries such as Barbados, sir. Up to last Thursday, she gave an address to the London School of Economics on this issue, sir. And I want to agree, sir, that this is not an issue that really and truly has been mentioned in this parliament as much as, in my opinion, it ought to have been, sir. And I want to agree, sir, with the King of the United Kingdom, who has said that reparations is a conversation whose time has come, sir. And there's been a recent study, the Batley study, and it was backed by an advisory committee led by Professor Robinson, who I believe is a judge on the World Court, that has estimated the today's value of the reparations that ought to be given by European powers and by the United Kingdom at trillions of dollars. In terms of the United Kingdom, which of course was the colonial power of our country, sir, $24 trillion owed by the United Kingdom to the Caribbean, of which $4.9 trillion is owed to Barbados by the United Kingdom, sir, for all the atrocities committed during slavery and colonialism against our ancestors, sir, in terms of personal injuries, in terms of sexual violence against our women, sir, rape, in terms of murder and hanging of our men, in terms of mental anguish, sir. And remembering, sir, of course, that Barbados, through the 1661 slave laws, sir, which said, for example, that any white person could murder any black person with impunity, sir. That was what the 1661 slave law said, sir, as you well know. And that law was the basis of the slave codes and slave legislation throughout the British, not only the British Empire, but the European Empire, sir. The French call it the Code Nord, sir. And they took the 1661 Barbados Code as precedent for almost, 200 years remaining of slavery, sir. And part of this, sir, and as I said, the time has come for this conversation, sir. A lot of people don't like this conversation, embarrassed. People of all races, tell the truth, but the time has come for it, sir. And I mean, we know that the United Kingdom, for example, can't pay back Barbados $4.9 trillion. Never could. France, quite honestly, sir, took what? I think 120 million francs from Haiti, sir. When you convert that today, I don't know how that could be done in the history of humanity, sir. Haiti, reason why Haiti is in its position. So they can't pay this back in money value, sir, but health, education, housing, development, sir, to try to help get us out of this intergenerational poverty that we all have in our constituencies, generation after generation after generation in poverty, and the difficulty in terms of getting it out, although we're trying our best, sir, to get it out in terms of educational transformation and obviously housing enfranchisement now, and allowing housing to those public officers, for instance, and low-income earners as well, sir. But we have to face it, sir. And in Barbados, we have a situation where the Church of England, sir, the Anglican Church, of which, sir, I was baptized in, sir, so I feel I can speak with moral authority on this issue too, because that is where I was baptized, in an Anglican church, sir, has to give some reparations too. So recently, the Church of England, without conversing with us or any other Caribbean countries, agreed to give back $100 million. $100 million, sir, yeah. It's more than nothing, sir. And I'm someone, I tell anybody, don't refuse money, sir. Don't refuse money. So yeah, $100 million. But the role of the Anglican Church, sir, the Church of England, in slavery in Barbados is well documented, sir. And yes, sir, the Anglican Church has played a role in our development. I'm not going to stand here and deny that, sir. The truth of the matter is, it was always said Barbadians were better educated than any other people in the Caribbean during colonialism, sir. But the fact is that a lot of that education went towards keeping black people in a subservient position to serve the plantation, sir. And you had the Located Laborers Act, which up to 1950, the early 1950s, with the Right Excellent Sir Grantley Herbert Adams, sir, the law was that you had to, if you're living on the plantation land, you had to work at the plantation. From the time you left and went to work on another plantation or somewhere else, you had to take up your chattel house and move, sir. So the Anglican Church, sir, needs to pay reparations in this country as well. And the psyche of our people is still there, the adverse and negative psyche, as shown by the fact that invariably any meeting that you have in this country, whether it's town hall, whether it's a PTA meeting, sir, the first place most people can go is to sit in the back. They're not going and sit in the front, and that is derived from slavery, sir. And the Anglican Church, in a lot of cases where blacks couldn't come and sit in the front, that was not their place, sir. So we have a situation where still the Anglican Church owns a lot of land, sir, tenantry land. When they had the St. George North by-election, just over 3 years ago, I was shocked when I was canvassing in the Glebe, St. George, to see how much church land there is on which houses are on, sir. And I don't know what are the challenges, sir. Why, for example, the Anglican Church can't do like the government of Barbados did and sell this land to the tenants who are on it, sir, because in the Glebe, St. George, for instance, some very nice houses on it. I mean, the Anglican Church can't take back up the land. Lovely wall houses on some of the, in some of the Glebe areas, sir. And not only St. George, St. John too. St. John was the heart of colonialism and slavery, one of the hearts. Both St. John and St. George.
You remember has 2 more minutes.
Thank you, sir. So I'm calling, sir, on the Anglican Church, sir, the church into which I was born and baptized, to seriously consider their role in the desire and the absolute need to give reparations to the people, the majority people of this country, sir. And let's start by transfer of the lands. so that people can be empowered, sir, and improve their status and conditions in life, sir. But also, the government of Barbados has a role to play, sir, because in my constituency, for instance, Douglas Road, Western and Reed Road, the Garden, tenants are still struggling to be able to purchase their land. They pay in money in a lot of cases, and not only in my constituency, throughout Barbados, to the land registry, that's the government department which receives the money, but then government, and not only this administration, sir, but the last administration too, has not financed sufficiently the mechanism for the government subsidy to be paid. But remember what I said, sir, $2.50, as you well know, sir. The tenant pays for these lands and government subsidizes the rest. That is the law of Barbados from the administration of the Right Honourable Owen Arthur. So I'm calling, sir, on the Cabinet of Barbados, sir, and then ultimately is this Parliament, to ensure that greater finances are made available to the Ministry of Housing. I know estimates being discussed now in various ministries, sir, but greater finances have to be made available to the Ministry of Housing so that more tenants of these lands, and in many cases now it is private tenantry land, can become empowered and become property owners, and can become enfranchised as is their human rights. And I would back any heads under the Ministry of Housing that grants greater funding so that more persons can become enfranchised through greater subsidization, or through the funds and finances being made available by government to subsidize the purchases of these tenantries and private tenantry lands by our constituents. So, sir, I end by, again, commending those responsible for this physical development plan. It is a tremendous document. Of course, the results are going to be shown in the implementation. So we all know that we're tremendous at crafting beautiful plans and visions and mission statements and policies, but then we have to implement it. And I could only wish the Honourable Senior Minister, a member for Christchurch West, full success as he and his officers seek to implement this physical development plan. I'm obliged to you, sir.
Honourable Leader, government business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move the suspension of the House until 2:35 p.m.
Wait a second.
The question that this Honourable Chairman be suspended until 2:35 p.m. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Meeting, the ayes have it. This Honourable Chairman stands suspended until 2:35 p.m.